already happening. More electric vehicles than diesel cars were registered in Germany in the first half of this year. Poland is now the EU's largest exporter of batteries and electric buses. Or take the new European Bauhaus that led to an explosion of creativity of architects, designers, engineers across our union. And if the European Green Deal has a soul, then it is the new European Bauhaus. So clearly something is on the move. And this is what the European Green Deal is all about. In my speech last year, I announced our target of at least 55% emission reduction by 2030. Since then, we have together turned our climate goals into legal obligations. And we are the first major economy to present comprehensive legislation in order to get it done. You've seen the complexity of the detail, but the goal is simple. We will put a price on pollution. We will clean the energy we use. We will have smarter cars and cleaner airplanes, and we will make sure that higher climate ambition comes with more social ambition, because this must be a fair green transition. And this is why we proposed a new social climate fund to tackle the energy poverty that already 34 million Europeans suffer from. So I count on both Parliament and Member States to keep the package and to keep the ambition together. When it comes to climate change and the nature crisis, Europe can do a lot, and it will support others. I am proud to announce today that the European Union will double its external funding for biodiversity, in particular for the most vulnerable countries. But Europe cannot do it alone. The COP26 in Glasgow will be a moment of truth for the global community. Major economies, from the US to Japan, have set ambitions for climate neutrality in 2050 or shortly after. That's good. But they need now to be backed up by concrete plans in time for Glasgow, because current commitments for 2030 will not keep global warming at 1.5 Celsius within reach. Every country has a responsibility. The goals that President Xi has set out for China are encouraging, but we call for that same leadership on setting out how China will get there. The world would be relieved if they showed they could peak emissions by mid-decade and move away from coal at home and abroad. But while every country has a responsibility, major economies like us do have a special duty to the least developed and the most vulnerable countries. The so-called climate finance is essential for them, both for mitigation and adaptation. In Mexico and in Paris, the major economies committed to provide $100 billion a year until 2025 to the least developed and most vulnerable countries. We deliver on our commitments. Team Europe contributes $25 billion a year, but others still leave a gaping hole towards reaching the global target. So closing that gap will increase the chance of success in Glasgow. My message today is that Europe is ready to do more. We will now propose an additional €4 billion for climate finance until 2027. But we expect the United States and our partners to step up too. This is vital because closing the climate finance gap together, the US and the European Union, would be such a strong signal for global climate leadership, and it is time to deliver now. We have no time to wait anymore. Honourable members, this climate and economic leadership is central to Europe's global and security objectives. It also reflects a wider shift in world affairs at a time of transition towards a new international order. We are entering a new era of hyper-competitiveness, an era in which some stop at nothing to gain influence, from vaccine promises to high-interest loans, from missiles to misinformation. An era of regional rivalries and major powers refocusing their attention towards each other. Recent events in Afghanistan are not the cause of this change, but they are a symptom of it. And first and foremost, I want to be clear. We stand by the Afghan people. We stand by the Afghan people, the women and children, prosecutors, journalists, and human rights defenders. I think in particular of women judges who are now in hiding from the men they jailed. They have been put at risk for their contribution to justice and the rule of law. We must support them, and we will coordinate all efforts with member states to bring them to safety. And we must continue supporting all Afghans in the country and in neighboring countries. We must do everything to avert the real risk that is out there of a major famine and a humanitarian disaster. And we will do our part. We will increase again humanitarian aid for Afghanistan by €100 million. This will be part of a new, wider Afghan support package that we will present in the next weeks to combine all our efforts. Honourable members, witnessing events unfold in Afghanistan was profoundly painful for the families and friends of fallen servicemen and servicewomen. We bow to the sacrifice of those soldiers, diplomats, and aid workers who laid down their lives for our common cause. To make sure that their service will never be in vain, we have to reflect on how this mission could end so abruptly. There are deeply troubling questions that allies will have to tackle within NATO. But there is simply no security and defence issue where less cooperation is the answer. So we need to invest in our joint partnership and draw on each side's unique strength. And this is why we are working with Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg on a new EU-NATO joint declaration to be presented before the end of the year. But this is only one part of the equation. Europe can and clearly should be able and willing to do more on its own. But if we are to do more, we first need to explain why. I see three broad categories. First, we need to provide stability in our neighbourhood and across different regions. We are connected to the world by narrow straits, stormy seas, and vast land borders. And because of that geography, Europe knows better than anyone else that if you don't deal in time with a crisis abroad, this crisis will come to you. Secondly, the nature of the threats we face is evolving rapidly, from hybrid to cyber attacks to the growing arms race in space. We see that disruptive technology has been the great equalizer in the way power can be used today by rogue states and non-state groups. You no longer need an army or missile to cause mass damage. You can paralyze industrial plants, city administrations, and hospitals. All you need is your laptop. You can disrupt entire elections with a smartphone and an internet connection. And the third reason is that our European Union is a unique security provider. There will be missions where NATO or the United Nations will not be present, but where Europe should be. On the ground, our soldiers work side by side with police officers, lawyers and doctors, with humanitarian workers and human rights defenders, with teachers and engineers. We can combine military and civilian alongside with diplomatic and development. And we have a long history in building and protecting peace. The good news is that over the past years we have started to develop kind of a European defense ecosystem. But what we need now is the European Defense Union. In the last weeks, there have been many discussions on expeditionary forces, on what type and how many we need, battle groups and EU entry forces. This is no doubt part of the debate, and I think it will be part of the solution. But the more fundamental issue is why this has not worked in the past. You can have the most advanced forces in the world, but if you're never prepared to use them, of what use are they? What has held us back until now is not just a shortfall of capacity, it is the lack of political will. And if we develop this political will, there's a lot that we can do at EU level. Allow me to give you 3 concrete examples. First, we need to build a foundation for collective decision-making, and this is what I call situational awareness. We fall short if member states active in the same reason do not share their information at the EU level. It is vital that we improve intelligence cooperation, but this is not just about intelligence in the narrow sense. It is about bringing together the knowledge from all services and all sources, from space to police trainers, from open source to development agencies. The European Union could have a unique scope and depth of knowledge. It's out there. But we can only use that information and make decisions if we have the full picture. And this is currently not the case. We have the knowledge, but it is disjoint. We have the information, but it is fragmented. And this is why the European Union could consider its own joint situational awareness center to fuse all of these different pieces of information and to be better prepared, to be fully informed, and thus to be able to decide. Secondly, we need to improve interoperability. This is why we're already investing in common European platforms, from fighter jets to drones and cybers. You know that. But we have to keep thinking of new ways to use all the possible synergies. One example could be to consider waiving value-added tax, the VAT, when buying defense equipment developed and produced in Europe. This would not only increase our interoperability, but it would also decrease our dependencies of today. And the third point is, we cannot talk about defense without talking about cyber. If everything is connected, everything can be hacked. And given that resources are scarce, we have to bundle our forces. And we should not just be satisfied to address the cyber threat, but also strive to become a leader in cybersecurity. It should be here in Europe where cyber defense tools are developed. And this is why we need a European cyber defense policy, including legislation on common standards under a new European Cyber Resilience Act. So, we can do a lot at EU level. But member states need to do more too. And this starts with a common assessment of the threats we face and a common approach to dealing with them. The upcoming strategic compass is the key process to this discussion. And we need to decide how we can use all the possibilities that are already in the treaty. And this is why, under the French presidency, President Macron and I will convene a summit on European defence. Honourable members, it is time for Europe to step up to the next level. In a more contested world, protecting our interests is not only about defending ourselves. It is also about forging strong and reliable partnerships. This is not a luxury. It is essential for our future stability, security, and prosperity. And this work starts by deepening our partnership with our closest allies. With the United States, we will develop our new agenda for global change, from the new Tech and Technology Council to health security and sustainability. The European Union and the United States will always be stronger together. And of course, the same goes for our neighbours in the Western Balkans. Before the end of the month, I will travel to the region to send a strong signal of our commitment to the accession process. We owe it to all those young people who believe in a future in Europe. And this is why we're ramping up our support through our new investment and economic plan with around a third of the region's GDP. Because, honourable members, investment in the future of the Western Balkans is an investment in the future of the European Union. And we will also continue investing in our partnership in our neighbourhood, from stepping up our engagement in the Eastern Partnership to implementing the new agenda of the Mediterranean and continuing to work on the different aspects of our relationship to Turkey. Honourable members, if Europe is to become a more global player, it also needs to focus on the next generation of partnerships. In this spirit, today's new EU Indo-Pacific strategy is a milestone. It reflects the growing importance of the region to our prosperity and our security, but it also reflects the fact that autocratic regimes use it to try to expand their influence. Europe needs to be more active and to be more present in the region. So, we will work together to deepen trade links, strengthen global supply chains, and develop new investment projects on the green and digital technologies. This is a template for how Europe can redesign its model to connect the world. We're pretty good at financing roads. But it does not make any sense for Europe if we build a perfect road between a copper that is Chinese copper mine that is Chinese-owned and a harbour that is Chinese-owned. So we have to get smarter when it comes to these kind of investment. And this is why we will soon present our new connectivity strategy called Global Gateway. We will build global gateway partnerships with countries around the world. We want investment in quality infrastructure, connecting people, goods and services around the world. We will take a values-based approach, offering transparency and good governance to our partners. We want to create links and not dependencies. And we know that this can work. Since the summer, the new underwater fibre optic cable has connected Brazil to Portugal. We will invest with Africa to create a market for green hydrogen that connects the two shores of the Mediterranean. We need a team global approach to make Global Gateway happen. We will connect institutions and investment banks and business community, and we will make this a priority for regional summits, starting with the next EU-Africa summit in February. We want to turn Global Gateway into a trusted brand around the world. And let me be very clear about one more point. Doing business around the world is good. Global trade around the world, that is good and necessary. But this can never, ever be done at the expense of people's dignity and freedom. Today, there are around 25 million people out there who are threatened or coerced into forced labor. We can never accept that they are forced to make products and that these products then end up for sale here in shops in Europe. So we will propose a ban on products on our market that have been made by forced labor, because human rights are not for sale at any price. And, honourable members, human beings are not bargaining chips. Look at what happened at our borders with Belarus. The regime in Minsk has instrumentalized human beings. They have put people on planes and literally pushed them towards Europe's border. This can never be tolerated. And the quick European reaction shows that. And rest assured, we will continue to stand together with Lithuania, Latvia and Poland, and let's call it what it is. It is a hybrid attack to destabilize Europe. We'll never tolerate that. These are not isolated events. We saw similar incidents at other borders, and we can expect to see it again. And this is why, as part of our work on Schengen, we will set out new ways to respond to such aggression and ensure unity in protecting our external borders. But as long as we do not find common ground on how to manage migration, our opponents will continue to target this. Meanwhile, human traffickers continue to exploit people through deadly routes across the Mediterranean. And these events show us that every country has a stake in building a European migration system. The new Pact on Migration and Asylum gives us everything we need to manage the different types of situations we face. All the elements are there. This is a balanced and humane system that works for all member states in all circumstances. We know that we can find common ground. But in the years since the Commission presented the pact, progress has been painfully slow. And I think this is the moment now for European migration management policy. So I urge this House and the Member States to speed up the process. This ultimately comes down to a question of trust. Trust between Member States, trust for Europeans that migration can be managed, trust that Europe will always live up to its enduring duty to the most vulnerable and most in need. I know that there are many strongly held views on migration in Europe, but I believe the common ground is not so far away. Because if you ask most Europeans, they would agree that we should act to curb irregular migration, but they would also agree that we have to act to provide a refuge to those forced to flee. They would agree that we should return those who have no right to stay. But they would also agree that we should welcome those who come here legally and make such a vital contribution to our society and our economies. And we should all agree that the topic of migration should never be used to divide us. I am convinced that there is a way that Europe can build trust amongst us when it comes to migration. Meine Damen und Herren Abgeordnete, Gesellschaften, die auf Demokratie und gemeinsame Werte bauen, stehen auf einem stabilen Fundament. Sie trauen dem Menschen etwas zu. Und so entwickeln sich neue Ideen, so entsteht Veränderung, so überwinden wir Unrecht. Das Vertrauen auf genau diese gemeinsamen Werte, das führte unsere Gründerväter und Gründermütter zusammen nach dem Zweiten Weltkrieg. Und es sind genau die gleichen Werte, die die Freiheitskämpfer einten, die vor nun mehr als 30 Jahren den eisernen Vorhang niederrissen. Sie wollten Demokratie. Sie wollten ihre Regierung frei wählen. Sie wollten den Rechtsstaat. Vor Gericht sollen alle gleich sein. Sie wollten der Bespitzelung und staatlicher Spionage ein Ende setzen und die Korruption bekämpfen. Sie wollten die Freiheit, anders zu sein als die Mehrheit. Oder wie es der ehemalige tschechische Präsident Václav Havel so wunderbar auf den Punkt gebracht hat, sie wollten, und ich zitiere, alle diese großartigen europäischen Werte. Es sind diese Werte, die dem kulturellen, religiösen und humanistischen Erbe Europas entstammen. Sie sind Teil unserer Seele, Teil dessen, was uns heute ausmacht. Und diese Werte sind nun in unseren europäischen Verträgen verankert. Und wir haben uns alle dazu verpflichtet, sie einzuhalten, als wir als freie und souveräne Staaten Teil dieser Union wurden. Wir sind entschlossen, diese Werte zu verteidigen. Und wir werden in dieser Entschlossenheit niemals nachlassen. Unsere Werte sind durch unsere Rechtsordnung garantiert und die Urteile des Europäischen Gerichtshofs sichern sie. Und diese Urteile sind bindend. Und wir achten darauf, dass sie eingehalten werden. Und zwar in jedem Mitgliedstaat unserer Union. Denn der Schutz der Rechtsstaatlichkeit ist nicht nur ein Ziel, er ist auch harte Arbeit und ein tägliches Ringen um Verbesserung. Unsere Berichte zur Rechtsstaatlichkeit sind durch die Reformen ein Teil dieses Prozesses. Ein positives Beispiel dafür sind jetzt die Justizreformen in Malta oder die Korruptionsuntersuchungen in der Slowakei. Und ab 2022 werden diese Berichte zur Rechtsstaatlichkeit zusätzlich konkrete Empfehlungen an die Mitgliedstaaten enthalten. Trotzdem gibt es in einigen Mitgliedstaaten besorgniserregende Entwicklungen. Und hier ist mir eines wichtig. Am Anfang steht immer der Dialog. Aber der Dialog ist kein Selbstzweck. Er muss auch zu einem Ziel führen. Und deshalb verfolgen wir den dualen Ansatz aus Dialog und entschlossenem Handeln. Und genau das haben wir letzte Woche getan. Und das werden wir auch weiterhin tun. Denn das Recht auf eine unabhängige Justiz, das Recht vor dem Gesetz gleich behandelt zu werden, auf diese Rechte müssen sich Menschen verlassen können. Und zwar überall in Europa und unabhängig davon, ob sie einer Mehrheit angehören oder einer Minderheit angehören. Das ist die Seele unseres Europas und die müssen wir verteidigen. Und meine Damen und Herren Abgeordnete, der europäische Haushalt ist die in Zahlen gegossene Zukunft unserer Union. Und deshalb muss auch er geschützt werden. Wir müssen dafür sorgen, dass jeder Euro und jeder Cent seinem Zweck zugutekommt und nach rechtsstaatlichen Grundsätzen ausgegeben wird. Investitionen, die unseren Kindern in Zukunft zugutekommen werden, dürfen nicht in finsteren Kanälen verschwinden. Korruption bedeutet nicht nur der Diebstahl am Steuerzahler. Korruption bedeutet nicht nur, dass Investoren abgeschreckt werden. Korruption führt dazu, dass großes Geld sich große und kleine Gefälligkeiten kaufen kann und dass die Mächtigen demokratische Regeln aushebeln können. Und wenn es um den Schutz unseres Budgets geht, werden wir jeden Fall verfolgen, mit allem, was in unserer Macht steht, und in Kürze damit beginnen. Meine Damen und Herren Abgeordnete, wenn wir unsere Werte verteidigen, dann verteidigen wir auch die Freiheit. Die Freiheit zu sein, wer man ist. Die Freiheit zu sagen, was einem durch den Kopf geht. Die Freiheit zu lieben, wen man will. Freiheit bedeutet aber auch die Freiheit von Angst. Während der Pandemie wurden zu viele Frauen dieser Freiheit beraubt. Es muss eine besonders schreckliche Zeit für diejenigen gewesen sein, die sich nirgendwo verstecken konnten, die nirgendwo vor ihren Peinigern fliehen konnten. Wir müssen Licht in dieses Dunkel bringen. Wir müssen Wege aus dem Schmerz aufzeigen. Ihre Peiniger müssen vor Gericht gestellt werden. Und diese Frauen müssen wieder frei und selbstbestimmt leben können. Wir werden deshalb bis Ende des Jahres ein Gesetz zur Bekämpfung von Gewalt gegen Frauen auf den Weg bringen. Es geht um wirksame Strafverfolgung, um Prävention und Schutz, online wie offline. Es geht um die Würde jeder Einzelnen und es geht um Gerechtigkeit. Und auch das ist die Seele Europas und dafür werden wir kämpfen. Meine Damen und Herren Abgeordnete, lassen Sie uns zum Schluss auf eine Freiheit blicken, die allen anderen Freiheiten eine Stimme gibt. Und das ist die Medienfreiheit. Journalistinnen und Journalisten werden angegriffen, einfach nur, weil sie ihre Arbeit machen. Einige werden bedroht und verprügelt, andere tragischerweise ermordet. Mitten in unserer Union möchte ich hier einige Namen nennen. Daphne Caruana Galizia, Jan Kuciak, Peter de Vries. Ihre Geschichten mögen sich in den Details unterscheiden, doch eines ist ihnen gemeinsam. Sie haben für unser Recht auf Information gekämpft und dafür sind sie gestorben. Information ist ein öffentliches Gut. Wir müssen diejenigen schützen, die Transparenz schaffen, die Journalistinnen und Journalisten. Und deshalb haben wir heute eine Empfehlung zum besseren Schutz von Journalistinnen und Journalisten vorgelegt. Und wir müssen denjenigen Einhalt gebieten, die die Medienfreiheit bedrohen. Medienhäuser sind nicht einfach x-beliebige Wirtschaftsunternehmen. Ihre Unabhängigkeit ist essentiell. Und deshalb braucht Europa ein Gesetz, das diese Unabhängigkeit sichert. Und genau ein solches Medienfreiheitsgesetz werden wir im nächsten Jahr vorlegen. Denn wenn wir die Freiheit der Medien verteidigen, dann verteidigen wir auch unsere Demokratie. Honourable members, strengthening Schumann's European idea that I invoked earlier is a continuous work. And we should not hide away from our inconsistencies and imperfections. But imperfect as we might be, our union is both beautifully unique and uniquely beautiful. It is a union where we strengthen our individual liberty through the strength of our community. A union shaped as much by our shared history and values as by our different cultures and perspectives. It is a union with a soul. Trying to find the right words to capture the essence of this feeling is not easy. But it is easier when you borrow them from someone who inspires you. And this is why I have invited a guest of honor to be with us today. Many of you might know her, a gold medalist from Italy who captured my heart this summer. But what you might not know is that only in April she was told her life was in peril. She went through surgery. She fought back. She recovered. And only 119 days after she left the hospital, she won Paralympic gold. Honourable members, please join me in welcoming Bebe Vio. Please stand up. Bebe has overcome so much, so young. Her story is one of rising against all odds, of succeeding thanks to talent, tenacity, and unrelenting positivity. She is the image of her generation, a leader and advocate for the causes she believes in. And she has managed to achieve all of that by living up to her belief that if it seems impossible, then it can be done. Se sembra impossibile, allora si può fare. And this was the spirit of our European founders, and this is the spirit of Europe's next generation. So let's be inspired by Bebe and by all the young people who change our perception of the possible, who show us that you can be what you want to be and that you can achieve whatever you believe in. Honourable members, that is the soul of Europe. That is the future of Europe. Let's make it stronger. Viva l'Europa!